everyone! Epic Games is working with studio partners such as Netflix to develop new collaborative work-from-home ready filmmaking methods. The resulting process is a groundbreaking form of remote virtual production not previously possible with traditional digital creative tools. Head over to the Unreal Engine feed to see how to create these collaborative setups using features available for everyone in Unreal Engine 425. Virtual production and live stream ready real-time facial animation have never been easier and more accessible thanks to our new iOS app, LiveLink Face for Unreal Engine. LiveLink Face streams high-quality facial animation in real time from your iPhone directly onto characters in Unreal, helping filmmakers, streamers, and animators streamline their workflows. Learn more about LiveLink Face on the feed and download it from the App Store today. In 2017, Epic Games released Robo Recall with support for user-created mods via a custom UE4 editor. Now, building on that foundation, you can download our new Simple UGC plugin, which includes many UGC features built for Robo Recall and the Robo Recall mod kit. Additionally, we've created an example project to show how it all works in the latest version of Unreal. The Simple UGC plugin is available on the official Epic Games GitHub organization with documentation to get you started. When Andrew Svanberg Hamilton left his childhood home of Australia to pursue a game development career nearly 9,000 miles away, he took with him deeply ingrained memories of family and the landscape. Now he's recreated them in a beautiful real-time short rendered in Unreal Engine. Explore Hamilton's process and inspiration in our spotlight of the gorgeous film. It's time to share the top weekly karma earners for this week. Many thanks to Evil Cleric, Every Nun, Clockwork Ocean, Crispy Penguin, Crewdimer, Shadow River, Turer, Bosscox, T. Sumisaki, and Grot13. Thank you all so very much. Get ready to steal your nerves for this spotlight. Dive is the first in a series of immersive survival horror films set in the uncharted corners of the planet, where man faces nature at her most beautiful and her most terrifying. Built entirely in Unreal, the trailer's sure to give you goosebumps. Keep an eye out for the film's full release on ASC's website. Here we have a beautiful RTX lighting study by veteran 3D artist Finn Matheson, with a main focus on composition, mood, and lighting. The scene was created with a combination of Megascan's assets, Evermotion, and personal assets. Venture over to ArtStation to see more of Finn's gorgeous work. Presented by Tilt Labs, the thoughtful and impressive short film Wake tells the story of a handful of robots exploring an anomaly. The small team did an outstanding job showcasing their abilities, and you can see more of their director Jeffrey Zachariah and the team's work on their ArtStation. Also, check out their write-up on 80 Level to learn about the production of Wake. Thanks for watching this week's news and Community Spotlight.
Hi everyone and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host Victor Broden, and my guests today are a large team of very nice people from the Coalition. I would like to introduce, first but not least, Colin Penty, Studio Technical Art Director from the Coalition.
Hello.
We have David Coleman, Technical Art Director from the Coalition.
Hello.
Nick Christiani, Lead Level Designer, also from the Coalition. Who'd have thought?
Hey.
And Mike Rayner, Studio Technical Director from the Coalition.
Hey everyone.
Welcome to the stream. Today we are going to cover Gears and Gears Tactics, and yes, there will be a small little sneak peek of Xbox Series X, but I will let you all go ahead and handle that. So first off, I would like to let Mike Rayner kick it off.
Great. Hi everyone. I'm Mike Rayner. I'm the Studio Technical Director for the Coalition, and we're going to talk about obviously Gears of War, and we're going to talk about our use of Unreal within the studio. I've got a brief agenda here that really covers what we're going to, at a high level, what we're going to cover off. I'm going to start talking a little bit about our studio, the history of Gears and Unreal, our use of Unreal Engine at the studio with Gears 4, 5, and Gears Tactics. Talk about what's new, what we're working on now, and then I'm going to hand it off to much more interesting demos with Colin Penty, Nick Christiani, and David Coleman, who are going to give live in-editor demos. So here's a picture of our studio, the Coalition, and our motto. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The Coalition is a name that speaks to the lore of Gears of War, the Order, the Coalition is of ordered governments, and it speaks to us really coming together with a unified goal, and that, of course, is to make Gears and AAA games. We're part of the Microsoft Xbox Game Studios. We're based in Vancouver, Canada, and we've been home of the Gears of War franchise since January 2014. Real quick, sort of at a high level, this is kind of the breakup of our internal development between engineers, designers, artists, audio, producers, and animators. Really just to give you kind of a view of how we split up our team and the talent that we have. Being a studio that shepherds a large franchise, we also have these other components with community support, esports, licensing, business intelligence, of course the website, and then studio operations. As you would expect with any large studio, we have a number of components and functions. So let's talk a little bit about Gears as a history. So Epic is the original creators of the Gears IP. It has always been a technical showcase of Unreal. And really, I just wanted to acknowledge the roots of the franchise. And we're grateful, the Coalition, to be able to build on this legacy. And we just want to thank Epic. And I really didn't think we could really talk about the current Gears without really kind of paying homage to the past. So thank you, Epic. So I'll talk a little bit about Gears of War 4. So Gears 4 was our first game on Unreal Engine 4. Gears was a bit unique in the sense that it was really important for us to retain the core Gears experience when starting Gears of War 4. We felt it was really important for us as a studio to be sort of true to that kind of core foundations of Gears, and really live that before we made major changes and evolved it, which of course we did. We started with an Unreal script to C++ conversion of Gears. That was certainly a challenging thing because Unreal 4 isn't kind of fully backwards compatible with Unreal Engine 3, but we were able to bring over a lot of that core by converting it to C++. The animation and the AI technology we rebuilt from the ground up using the new systems within Unreal Engine 4, and we stood up cover systems, combat zones, a lot of the core AI systems required to create encounters in Gears encounters, and for a third-person shooter. It was actually a little bit, we had an internal conversation early on about whether we should actually stick with Unreal Engine 3 because we had the existing Gears game, and we could have just gotten started with that. But really, going to Unreal Engine 4 was the right choice because it set us up for both building a modern contemporary Gears game, but also set up foundations for our future. Ultimately, we shipped on Unreal 4.11 at the time, so that's a bit old now, and that was in October 2016. And there was a lot of new Unreal features at the time that we were able to leverage that helped bring the franchise to kind of modern modern standards. Physically based shading was obviously a huge component to increasing the visual quality throughout the game. New lighting engine, improved reflections, shadowing systems, improved shading models for skin and metals, high dynamic range support was part of the engine, and we also leveraged dynamic resolution scaling, which was really quite important for us to be able to target different console specs between Xbox One S, Xbox One X, but also being able to maintain an extremely high frame rate and lock it and let it dynamically scale, maintain that high frame rate, but increase overall visual quality by keeping that bar as high as possible. A couple Gears 4 firsts that are worth mentioning that Unreal helped us enable. It's a cross-play game, so we can play across console and PC. It's one of the first titles to ship on DirectX 12. We moved the franchise from 30 frames per second to 60 frames per second for multiplayer. Dynamic weather and wind systems, huge set piece destruction with geometry caching and offline simulations in Houdini, and spatial audio. So jumping forward to Gears 5, we were able to leverage the foundation, the technology we built for Gears 4, and really increase our ambition and challenge expectations and push the technology further with Gears 5. Gears 5 shipped in August 2019, and it's actually a blend of Unreal 411 to 420. For us, we'd actually made some pretty extensive engine changes, which made a full integration prohibitive. Certainly possible, but could have been quite disruptive with a large production team. What we did instead is we integrated some major high impact features. So we really benefited from the work that Epic was doing with the latest versions of the engine, and we partnered with them to bring these key features across. Some of the highlights here: H-Lot improvements, signed distance field shadowing, the volumetric fog systems, improved character visuals and performance with skin, hair, and eye shaders. I have animation inertial blending in there. This is actually technology that we added to the engine, but has now been brought back into the latest version of Unreal, and that you can leverage. The replay foundations and netcode improvements we were able to leverage to add kill cam to multiplayer, which was a feature that had been asked for quite a long time for multiplayer. Significantly, we optimized and continued to improve performance and increase visuals with Gears 5. We went and took the campaign to 60 frames per second, Horde, and sort of PvE and PvP multiplayer, all at 60 frames per second. And Gears uses dedicated servers, leveraging Unreal Engine support for that. And we took the servers and we increased them to 60 hertz, lowering overall end-to-end latency and tightening up the multiplayer experience. We had a 3-player split screen. That's something that certainly has happened in the past, but a lot of modern games have dropped split screen support, and we added it, and that was well received. And we also dipped our toes into larger open world levels, which was both sort of refreshing for the franchise, but also a pretty daunting technical task that we couldn't have done without leveraging the work that Epic had done with open world support up to that point. So Gears Tactics is another game that we've shipped recently. It's a PC exclusive. I'm going to show you a video that will give you kind of a quick overview of what Gears Tactics is all about.
they came for us. They invaded every part of our world. So, we did the only thing we could. We set the world on fire. Now my war begins. Against the monster that created these monsters.
Summon the beast! Crush them!
And it's time to go hunting. That bridge is our way in. And they can't flank us.
Don't go gentle. Bring it, shitheads. Love one!
Enemy reinforcements!
Find your own ride, asshole. Get out of squashing range! Come see what my newest creation thinks of your little flag.
Just like we planned it.
Play it with Xbox Game Pass.
That's an awesome trailer.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So let me. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, there we go. So, Gears Tactics, of course, is a turn-based strategy game. It's fast-paced, and it's intense. It's visceral. It's obviously very Gearsy, and it's set before the events of Gears 1. The video really kind of highlights a lot of the technology and kind of features and gets you a sense of the gameplay. There's actually an Unreal Game Fest talk that was on July 14th that talks about some of the AI technology and kind of turn-based tactics engineering that went into simultaneous AI actions in Gears Tactics. So I definitely encourage people to watch that. There's also a great article on UnrealEngine.com that sort of covers the game, the turn-based AI, game mechanics, and RPG elements. From a technology standpoint, we used the same version of Unreal Engine and our sort of custom Gears 5 engine with Gears Tactics. Obviously, Gears Tactics had a lot of customization, a lot of features specific to that game, and a lot of love and effort went into making this tactics game. But one thing that is really worth kind of calling out is by using a common engine and being able to share that within our studio, we were able to kind of leverage improvements both in features, performance, across both games. Gears Tactics is, Gears Tactics is going to be coming to console this fall. It shipped on PC, and it very much is a PC first title. And we didn't want to dilute that by trying to kind of consoleify it. And we wanted to treat each platform the way it really needs to be to get the best experience. And so console will be coming this fall, and we're able to leverage a lot of the work that we've been doing for Gears 5 as we bring that onto console. Here's a screenshot that shows some of the usage of cover and kind of Overwatch and in Gears Tactics. One thing that's kind of neat and worth mentioning is that we're using a procedural level system. We use procedural tiles that can be combined in different combinations so that when you play the game, everyone who plays the campaign is going to get a slightly different experience. And it obviously adds replayability and through sort of mixing matching tiles as we create the layouts for the environments. For that, we developed a lighting system where we procedurally light the tiles when we sort of generate that layout on the fly, using a spherical radiance transfer global illumination system that takes into account the light transfer across tiles as well as cover layout, which is pretty innovative. There's deep customization, both in terms of sort of RPG elements for kind of tuning the abilities of your squad, but also, as you saw in the video, we have some pretty deep weapon and character customization as well. So as a PC-only title, we were able to leverage Unreal's ability to support a wide range of scalability. One of the key advantages of Unreal is that for many of the visual features, there are different quality settings. There are different features you can turn on and off and configure on the fly. What we do is we use Epic's Unreal Engine 4's ability to detect the hardware that you're running on. It will actually run some dynamic performance analysis to kind of benchmark your system. And then through that, we will pick the best settings, recommended settings for your rig, for your PC setup, so that you get the most optimal visual performance as well as kind of frame rate experience. And then we expose all those options through options menus so that players can go and tune and customize the game the way they expect. And it's really important for PC players to expect that, but it's really a highlight of Unreal's really extensive support for scalability and PC that we're able to leverage that. So I highly recommend, obviously, if you're making a PC game, to leverage this. One thing that's noteworthy is these scalability features, of course, are available on console as well. And with the modern console generation, we're seeing different performance profiles even within a current generation. We have the Xbox One S, we have the Xbox One X, and of course now we're looking at Xbox Series X. And so being able to kind of leverage this technology and these features allow us to really have the game ship as a cross-platform game and not compromise or build a game to the lowest common denominator, really pushing the hardware wherever the game ships. This screen here is our benchmark results screen. So this is something that we added, which is pretty cool, and I would recommend people do this, where we have a level where you can kind of run this benchmark with whatever settings you've chosen, and then you can see the results, how your system's performing, and of course you can see what settings. This is a pretty impressive rig that this is running on. So what are we up to now? I got another video, and let's show this first.
This is really bad! That was beautiful, baby! Who wants the party? I'm back, baby! This is my kind of fun! So weak! Oh, yeah! You're pathetic. Let's do this. Here we go! Bring it on! Hell yeah, that's how we do it! Oh yeah, you can't stop this!
So that was the trailer for our Gears 5 multiplayer Operation 4 that just came out. Gears 5 has been out for 9 months now. It has a large active multiplayer base, and we have been constantly updating the game and providing new content and features for the title. We have quarterly releases called Operations, and that was the video for Operations 4, which just came out 2 days ago. With these operations, we'll have new character skins, we'll have new character customization, new maps, new modes, bug fixing, and gameplay tuning. The changes we make are very much based on community feedback, and we prioritize what we do to really try and kind of meet the expectations of the community and to continue to support and build momentum for the game. This recent operation, we've had some pretty significant changes based on feedback, and we've had some really positive response to it so far. As you saw in there, we have like a new ranking system, more consumer-friendly store, improvements to gameplay tuning, matchmaking improvements, and of course, new content and experiences. The game has really evolved quite a bit, and the main kind of point here is Gears as a franchise and Gears as a game, obviously Gears 5 being the prime game out there right now, is extremely important to us, and we want to ensure the community and the core audience is happy with the game that we have out there, that we sustain that game. That is the face of what we do, and we're going to continue to update it. We're going to have future operations with new maps and new skins and improvements, and obviously driven by sort of community feedback. From a technology standpoint, I think one thing that's just worth noting is that by using Unreal Engine 4, we've been able to make continuous content and feature updates to the game. That's sort of, a testament to Unreal being a content-driven engine that's inherently has, content is inherently discoverable in it. Of course, we've had to invest a lot of effort and thought into patching the game and having content-driven server-side updates. And so for any game developer, live development and live support of your title is really what modern game development is about. You have to think about this stuff and how you're going to approach it before you ship your game. And we've been really happy with our ability to do that with Unreal. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead and talk a little bit about the Xbox Series X. Okay, sorry about that. So some of you may have seen the Xbox Series X kind of tech reveal that happened in March. We showed a demo of Gears 5, running on Xbox Series X hardware. Digital Foundry was there, and they did a great breakdown of what we did, and of course the hardware as well. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. The work was actually done in partnership with Epic. We took our current engine for Gears 5 and we got it stood up on Xbox Series X in just a couple weeks. And we actually worked quite closely with Epic engineers in doing it. Unreal 425 Plus actually has support for Xbox Series X now, so any developer who wants to add the platform support for the game can do that. Because of the amazing amount of performance and power in the Xbox Series X, we were able to bring over our full PC UltraSpec feature set. Sort of listed here, higher resolution textures, higher spec graphic fidelity across really all of our major visual features, and then more. We went beyond the UltraSpec feature set in terms of what we could do. We enabled context shadows supported by the engine, adding extremely realistic shadowing, as each pixel screen traces back from the light source. This really increased a lot of the shadow detail within the scene, and of course is all sort of real time, and so supports all our dynamic destruction and dynamic objects within the scene. There was a newer feature in Unreal 4.2.5, Screen Space Global Illumination, that we backported into our version in Gears 5, which allowed us to achieve full real-time GI, 60 frames per second, 4K, and it really improved the lighting solution within the game. We no longer needed our AO pass. The SSGI really gave us a broader, more accurate screen space AO solution that was not baked offline, fully dynamic, so it responded to the lighting within the scene. Higher particle counts. One thing that's sort of note, it's actually a big difference from Gears 4 to Gears 5, is all of our cinematics are real-time in engine. But we were able to take our cinematics and move them from 30 frames per second to 60 frames per second while enabling all these ultra-spec PC features. So it really looks great, and I'm excited for people to get their hands on it when it ships this holiday. We're investigating 120 frames per second support for multiplayer, which is pretty exciting. The hardware is certainly powerful enough to do it, and so we're not announcing anything right now. But you know, this is something that we're excited to hopefully support. So here's a few screenshots. So I hope these show up nicely on the stream. These are 4K shots. You can see here there's the Xbox One X, which runs at 30 frames per second in our cinematics, and Xbox Series X running at 60 frames per second. Here you can really see the increased texture detail in the armor. You can see the scratches. You'll see it in the pores of the skin on the face. You can also see some increased foliage in the background as we've kind of pulled in our level of detail with the additional performance. Here's a shot of Del Walker. Same points here. Increased detail on armor with the ultra spec textures and in the skin. This is a good shot that shows off the screen space global illumination. If you look sort of under the ridge there, you can see the darkening of sort of this sort of natural broad AO that you get. It really sort of grounds the lighting in the scene. And of course, you can't see here because it's static, but this is all dynamic. So if you shot a rocket through the scene and it lit up, you know, all those shadows would update as you would expect in real time. This is another shot here. You know, in this, this is also showing off the SSGI. You can see, you know, there's a lot of light bleeding before, and this really sort of tightens up the scene. Colin, is there anything you want to call out here in this shot?
Hey guys, yeah, I think yeah, you called out the SSGI, and I think the other element that really helps this shot is the further out cascade distance. So cascades are now at PC ultra spec distance, and that really allows the cavern to kind of fully self-shadow itself. Right.
Cool. Good call. It shows off the contact shadows. You can obviously see it on the skeleton there and the objects in the scene. This is from the spotlight that's being cast from Jack, the companion robot, which is off screen here. Really adds a lot of life to the scene. This is actually technology we added to the engine called cone step mapping. I'm going to let Colin speak to it.
Yeah, so what's cool about this is we are happy to announce that we are adding additional relaxed cone step maps to the content for Xbox Series X. So areas where it was just flat before, like this flat grate, you get that sort of subtle depth, in some cases not so subtle, that really gives that extra dimension. So you can see it here in this grate as well. So we're doing a full pass across the campaign to add these relaxed cone step maps across the whole campaign. And really give that sense of depth there. I'll talk a bit more about the technology behind it in a second. You can really see those bolts there almost look 3D now, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about this.
Cool. Okay, so that's it for me. I'm going to hand it off to Colin and the others who are now going to kind of show their in-editor demos. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Rainer.
Should I share now, Victor?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Okay, so I am just going to, I have like a video here I've edited together of Gears 5 running in the editor. So I'm going to talk for a little while about just Gears 5 work, and then at the end I'll show off a little bit more Xbox Series X features like SSGI and contact shadows. So starting off here, I wanted to kind of show what the opening area of the game looks like. So this is sort of the opening area with all the fish there under the water. You can see a little vertex shader. And this area, we spent a lot of time on because it was the opening of the game. So lots of all the systems are running here. I've got vegetation, we got the volume fog, obviously the particle systems there with the waterfall. So you can really see all the detail we put in here. This is definitely one of the trickier scenes to run at 60 frames per second, just due to the sheer GPU heaviness of this scene. So here I'm kind of zooming in down on a relaxed cone step map. So this is what Mike Rainer was just showing you guys. So this is a relaxed cone step map that's shipped in Gears 5, so not a new one. But I wanted to show a little bit about it. So this is what the relaxed cone step map texture looks like. And you can see here, yeah, it's just a low-res texture, 256 there. And we have an ability here to set a max depth. So it has a 4-centimeter depth currently, so I can set that to 0. You might be wondering what this container, what this editor is. This is our custom material masking system. So you can see here, so I've flattened it now, so the depth is 0, super flat. We're adding some relaxed cone step mapping back in. Give it a second here, and you can really see the depth you get from that. It doesn't have the artifacts, like the stepping artifacts you see from parallax occlusion mapping. You can zoom right in, and it holds up. This relaxed cone step map is generated from a height map. And so here's another example of relaxed cone step mapping. This is one of my favorite in the game. So right now it's off. So right now there is no relaxed cone step mapping on the snow. So I'm going to bring up the editor and enable relaxed cone step mapping. So there you go. So you can see the relaxed cone step mapping just turned on here for the snow. You can see it just really gives that sense of depth. And one additional feature we're adding for Xbox Series X is we're going to make it so all these relaxed cone step maps self-shadow. So getting self-shadowing will really improve the look there. So moving on to the sun flare. So we had a sun flare we built for Gears 5. This was done near the end of development when we kind of realized we needed something. When you look at the sun, that's just a bit more of an enhancement over the existing kind of lens flare system. That's just a post-process system. So this was a blueprint or resident visual effects guru James Sharp created. So you can see here, you can control the saturation of the ring. There's the glow size, that's the center glow. There's a brightness of the glow in the center there. This was basically all a vertex shader facing the camera. And I'll show you the shader here in a second. And what it basically does is it grabs the scene image and flips it on the X and Y axis. And the contrast is increased, so that way you can kind of isolate just the brightest parts of the image. And so that way you kind of get a glow on the opposite side of whatever the bright thing is in the frame, which is semi-realistic. And the ring of the geo shrinks and grows as the camera goes towards and away from the source of the lens flare. So geocaching, so this is our geocache solution. Basically, this is equivalent to what Unreal Engine has out of the box. This is the collapse in facility at the beginning of the game. So you can see here, we got this super dense mesh. This was all simulated offline in Houdini, and then brought in as a vertex stream. You can see at the top here we got 1.4 million verts, 700,000 triangles. Kind of reflecting on this after watching Unreal Fest and Unreal Engine 5, this has less triangles than a rock from Unreal Engine 5 demo. So looking forward to Nanite there. It'll be amazing. But yes, you can see here just how cool this looks when you just kind of play it through and just right through in the editor. Our geocache system uses compressed transforms. It's a slightly custom solution because we built it before Unreal Engine 4 added support for it. So that's why it's slightly different. We basically are using 8 bytes per frame per object to stream that. So this is Rocket Hangar, one of our larger levels. This is one of the levels that gave me a slight heart attack when we kind of realized we had to hit 60 frames per second with a level this dense and this large. So yeah, I wanted to show you the kind of the HLOD colorization of the Rocket Hangar. Anything green there was, I can rewind a little bit because it's going a little bit fast. Anything green there is a visible HLOD. Anything blue is a invisible HLOD. So I'm using the level of detail colorization there. So you can really see kind of where we put HLODs in this area of Rocket Hangar. You can see, lots of things popping in and out. But what I think is cool is when you go to lit mode, you don't really see anything. You don't see the pop. And it's a testament to kind of the hard work our tech art team did in this area. I believe Samuel Cloutier, our tech artist, did the HLODs in this area, did a great job. But it was a huge challenge to kind of get this level running at 60. Mainly it was draw thread, just the sheer object counts. So that's where you want to use your HLODs to reduce the draw thread. But of course it's a balancing act with memory. And so this is LOD colorization now, not HLOD. So it's just showing you kind of the LODs that were used as well. So you kind of use the two in conjunction to really kind of hit performance. Okay, volume fog. So we were very excited when Epic added volume fog to the engine. We integrated that over to Gears 5 immediately. This was kind of one of my favorite hallways with volume fog in Gears 5. So you can see here, this is with game view off. You can see we added these blueprints called fog detail sprites, and it kind of allowed us to add more detail to the fog if need be. I'll show you a bit more about that in a second. But right here, I'm changing the grid pixel size down to 12 here. So you can kind of see this is sort of getting into like PC ultra spec. And I believe like this is 8. I believe around 6 or so is, yeah, this is 6. This is PC insane spec, I believe. So really get that clarity of detail right from the volume fog. So we've been able to, go to PC ultra spec settings on Xbox Series X for this fog, which I'm very excited about. And it's covered in my Unreal Dev Days talk, but we did create a volume fog painting system that you can check out, as well as if you Google GameStack Live, James Sharp, he has a whole talk on how he created the paintable volume fog for Gears 5. So this is showing, again, this is how we'd create billboarded, textured clouds that would be inside the true 3D volume fog, and this kind of created the textural detail inside the fog. We were just, with the grid pixel size, we just couldn't get it quite high enough in the fog itself to have a cloud shader. If we had unlimited performance, we could do that as well, and we did that, but we just couldn't run it. So we kind of hit this middle ground where we'd have volume fog, but with not a lot of shader detail, and then we'd put these billboarded textures inside. This is me just playing with the settings on this blueprint. It's called the fake volumetric blueprint. But it really created some convincing results actually in the final game. You can see our lens flare system there again. Okay, lighting. So I'm quite proud of the lighting solutions we came up with for Gears 5. I think it really allowed us to kind of unlock the full power of the engine and the consoles. So here's the ice overworld, flying around. I love doing this in the ice overworld and the sand overworld. So you can kind of see there's some volumes there where those are blocking volumes where the player can't skiff over. So I'll go over here and start enabling and disabling some shadows. can see how massive these worlds were, by the way. Testament to the technical level design team, Nick Trisciani and his group, and as well as TechHeart to kind of getting these things, and engineering to get these things running smoothly. It was a huge amount of effort. So right here, I've got the directional light, and I've just disabled the ray trace distance field shadows. So we have cascades up close. You can see those there, but you can see now that it just goes to nothing. So that's where our ray trace distance field shadows come in. So when you can see when I have them back on now, there's really a nice blend between the cascaded shadow maps and the distance field shadows, and it solves that tough problem which is how do you shadow things in the distance, right? You don't want to bake out everything because that just ends up costing a lot of memory and time. And this is me playing with this is the cascaded shadow map distance of 6,000 here in the ice overworld. That's probably one of the furthest distances we could afford in Gears 5. Most of the linear levels went down to like 4,000 or even 3,000. So this level was definitely, we were pushing the Xbox One X as hard as we could. And so here I'm going to visualize mesh distance fields. So here are basically the distance fields that we used, and we basically would disable a distance field anytime we thought you wouldn't see that object in the distance cast a shadow. So you can see that I've quite aggressively, I believe I was the tech artist that did this level, I went through and disabled distance fields on a lot of objects just to try and get that GPU performance back. So you just kind of have the highest trees and the highest cliff faces, and those basically are casting the distance field shadows because those are the ones you're going to notice. So yeah, we also lowered the distance field resolution quite a bit, just to the default resolution, just to save memory, memory and disk space. I believe after I did one of the reductions, we calculated we saved 1 gigabyte of disk space or something like that. So it's not insignificant. And this is me showing off skylights. We used stationary skylights for single player. We use static skylights for the most part for multiplayer, and we just found that the stationary skylights really gave us sort of better lighting response on the characters and environments. So snow deformation. So our campaign TechArt lead Jeff Lester did an awesome deformation working with Chris Wallace, senior rendering engineer, to basically make this awesome deformation system that Gears 5 uses. So what is it doing here? So we are storing this all out into a texture array where we can basically maintain persistence of these deformation trails for a long time. And we have a material that's doing a normal map blend around the point of contact there. And of course, we're also running tessellation on the snow. So we're running, we did our own custom async tessellation. So the tessellation runs async over other passes. And this basically allows us to tessellate very aggressively around the feet. And so you can get kind of high quality deformation. And then it sort of tessellates less out in the distance. Another thing I'm proud of is we did the harder thing here, which is we made the ground self-shadow. So you can see that the ridges are all self-shadowing down on themselves, and I found that made a really big impact on the ice overworld. So we took the performance hit there to do self-shadowing of the snow trails. This was my failed attempt at showing wireframe, which isn't very useful. I apologize. It's mainly showing more of kind of what the landscape tessellation is doing, not the async tessellation. But yeah, in the distance, the snow trails become a normal map just to maintain the fidelity. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about our proprietary material masking system. This is basically a layered material system, a lot like what Unreal has now. I believe it's in beta. But the difference is that ours allows you to cook out the result to basically optimize the GPU and memory. So you can see here I have a couple layers. I have a brick, a plaster, and a detail map. So I can kind of hide and unhide these layers. So you can kind of see this is how our artist would kind of work in the level. So you can kind of see I've hidden and I'm hiding and unhiding the detail maps. You can kind of see that extra detail that detail map adds, and then I'm hiding the plaster. You kind of see it's blending in quite well there with the height map of the brick as well. We're using Vertex colors to do the blending between these two. I'm showing you here some of the blend parameters. So yeah, you can see I used red channel, vertex color, vertex paint. So nothing revolutionary there. But yeah, this really kind of unlocked us to kind of allow us to iterate a lot in the engine, which I'm always a fan of. So that was sort of the impetus for this system, was like, how can we iterate more in engine? We still use tools like Substance Painter and things like that as well, but a lot of the layering we could do in the engine. And here's another example of the material masking system. So we knew we had a lot of snow in this game, so we had to generate a blend that would work naturally with the snow. So here's the snow layer. So we're doing a vector blend. We're basically grabbing per pixel. We're basically grabbing a down vector there and blending the snow in to the top of the rock there. So you can see here I can change the coverage. I can change the offset of the snow, and this kind of, just really allowed us to fine tune the look of the snow for our game. And you can see here I have a whole bunch of additional layers. Like there's the base rock here. So I've gone down, so we could have what we call nested containers in the material masking system. So I've now gone down a level, and this is just the rock container. And you can see all the different layers. And also here, what I'm showing off, I believe, is these are what we call the smelted textures. So these are the textures that get cooked out of our material masking system. So red and green are the normal map, and blue is the smoothness map, and alpha is the metalness map. And yes, we use smoothness, not roughness, on Gears 5. And we did this, and then we do a BC7 compression on that. I talk about this in my Unreal Dev Days talk, which is on the YouTube channel for Unreal Engine a bit more. But this allowed us to really save about 10 to 40% of our memory per material. We just have so many assets in Gears 5. We have so many game modes, so much content, that unless we did some aggressive packing like this, we just would balloon in size. So that was a big win for us, and the quality drop is negligible. You can't see it. Okay, now talking a bit about optimization. So this is one of the pre-Kadar levels, I believe. So going around, beautiful, snow-swept forest here. So let's look at some of the optimization view modes. So this was a cool view mode we added called Auto Sun Shadow. This was done by Steve Anachini from Disbelief. And what it did was it basically would calculate which object is in shadow and which one is not in shadow. And if an object is in shadow, it would auto disable casting shadows on it, because you don't need a shadow if it's already in shadow. And this would really help us on the draw thread and the GPU. And you can see here I had this ability to force disable. So anything that's red has to cast a shadow, and anything that's green does not have to cast a shadow. Sometimes you might see something that's green that's in the sunlight. That's probably because we forced disable the shadow on that to save performance. So this was really handy to really rapidly allow us to hit performance, because we just found it was such a brutal, time-consuming pass to kind of have a tech artist go through and go, is this object in shadow? Okay, disable the shadow casting. And so this really was an accelerator for us. I'm sure someone today could probably write a fancy blueprint or Python script as well to do this. I know the tool did rely on light mass to kind of calculate what it was doing. So now I'm going to play an editor here. So here's a character. This is what it looks like when we play an editor on Gears 5. So again, so cool to this day for me that you can just play an editor using Unreal Engine and just play the game and do things and play with assets. And so I just wanted to show shader complexity. I thought some people might be interested in that. You can see this was there's some heavy stuff here, right? This has the deformable snow on the ground, and that's one of the heaviest shaders. So that's why that's so bright red. And then the character shaders are some of the heaviest shaders in our game as well, due to the amount of layers you can have on a character shader, right? Like a shield or blood or goop, or so many of the other effects you can have in some of the other game modes. Here I attempt to show quad overdraw, which doesn't work for some reason, but I'll show it to you in the editor in a second. So shader complexity was a mode we of course relied on a lot here, and this is just showing off. I was kind of just trying to step through a bit of the early process of what we would start to do to look at performance. You bring up stat unit here, So you can see I have stat unit. I'm looking at the game draw GPU times here, and we have this work in total. And so I would be looking at the work numbers and sort of start hiding things. So hide all the static meshes, hide all the skeletal meshes, and then look at what those numbers are doing. So hide all the instance foliage in this case. And that really kind of helped us. That was just like the first step of many steps to kind of start identifying, okay, what's the bottleneck here? What's the issue? That's hiding the shadows, show dynamic shadows. That was always a handy one. And then so beyond this, we would of course, we'd be doing this on an Xbox, not in the editor. And on that Xbox, we'd then probably run pics to further deep dive into what's going on. There's of course the Unreal Insights tool now, which does a lot of that in the newer versions of Unreal. And this is quad overdraw in the level. So we would use this to, we didn't use this early on, and then we began to use this a lot to kind of later on to identify LOD issues, like an LOD that's maybe heavier than it needs to be. This was a great way in the overworlds especially to identify issues. Anything with vegetation, that was super handy to have as well. So there's some of the view modes we added. And so now onto characters. So, this demo wouldn't be complete without looking at some cool characters. So here's Dell. We really put in an effort to have a strict draw call budget. That Dave Coleman and crew did a great job at kind of keeping that in check and enforcing that. So that the draw call budget was sort of, it's all getting hazy now, but it was roughly like 6 materials. Beyond that, we were a bit concerned about draw calls. And so you can see here we have all the shaders on the left. Here's like one of the skin shaders. We did create a new shading model for the skin that wasn't too much different than vanilla as it is today, but we did improve the backscattering from Gears 4. We realized at the beginning of Gears 5 that the Gears 4 backscattering wasn't fantastic. And then we added dual lobe specular, and I think it was like the next month Epic announced that they were adding dual lobe specular to the skin shader. We're like, oh, okay, great. So we don't have to do this in the future. And we added a lot of detail normals on Gears 5. We were big fans, not just on characters, but for environments as well. Like one of the big content changes from Gears 4 to 5 is detail normals on everything. So this is the armor on Dell. So at the top level, you can see it's fairly simple, right? We have the dynamic layer. This is where all the dynamic systems happen on the character, like blood, splatter, and gore, and all that. But then there's this smeltable layer. This is where you can see really the complexity that we were dealing with the amount of layers the character team would put into their material containers. It was quite amazing what they were able to do within Unreal. So lots of layers here basically was my point. You can see, and then every layer points to a nested container, and that nested container is one of our base swatches in Unreal. Okay, so wanted to show you off some cool Xbox Series X stuff. So let's look at some of the SSGI in the game. This is all running in editor. This is not running on Xbox Series X, but this will run on Xbox Series X fine. So this is an area in defense, and I thought this was really amazing, kind of the grounding that the SSGI gives. So that's with it off there, and that's with it on. You just really see under the desks and the chairs, just the broad AO you get from the SSGI really does a fantastic job to make this level really look more believable. So this was really exciting. Now, of course, when I disable the SSGI, there is a SSAO that would be there in Gears 5 that wasn't visible there in the video, but it's quite subtle when I tried it. Okay, so this is in the shed, and this is really cool. So I've just turned on SSGI off this jack spotlight here, and you can really see the GI bouncing around the scene. And for me, it's just so cool that we can have real-time GI at 60 frames per second on a console. It just feels like a few years ago we were working on Xbox One, and like none of this was couldn't even contemplate any of this. So this is just a testament to the power of Xbox Series X. So I'll flick it back on and off here a few times. So really again, off, on. You really see that nice, and it's not like a fake GI. It's a real GI, per pixel. So it really shows off kind of the nice moments. So definitely the flashlight moments. I've been loving the flashlight moments in the Gears 5 campaign with the SSGI enabled. This was another really cool area where we notice the SSGI doing some cool real-time things. So this is in Rocket Hangar. You can see there's this flame. This has been slow mode down to 0.1, I believe, so it's very slow. And there's the GI off the fire there. So you can see, so there's a GI on and then the GI off, and you can really see how much GI is coming off this flame. And it really shows kind of the real-time nature of the SSGI. And then now this is back to real-time speed, and you'll see the fire extinguish, and then the GI goes away. And so that's just so cool. Again, all at 60 frames per second on Xbox Series X. And the contact shadows. So this is what contact shadows on. Again, in defense. I'm just in the editor here, and you can see just all the grounding shadows on all the ivy and the trees. So that's, I'm flicking it on and off, on, off, and then back on. So really, you can just see how it's really makes it more per pixel accurate. There's no biasing issues on the shadows. These are all features we've grabbed from Unreal Engine and integrated into our version of the editor. So really does a lot with vegetation, but also does a lot in some other areas here. The thing I also secretly like about contact shadows, when you're doing kind of revisiting a game that's already shipped, is that it ignores our cast shadow flags. It just casts a shadow regardless. And so that really helps. If we disable the shadow for optimization purposes, you now get a shadow on that object without us having to go find that object and turning the shadows back on. One thing also worth noting, you might see in that UI there, we split out the SSGI AO and indirect as two separate tunable parameters, as well as of course the contact shadows. And this really gave us the full control. So we can tune contact shadows on off for directional lights, spotlights, point lights independently, as well as SSGI, the GI component, and the AO component differently. So that really is kind of what TechArt is doing right now. As we speak, TechArt is going through campaign and multiplayer and tuning these values per level. So again, you can see the contact shadows you get all on here. Most obviously, these objects probably had their shadows disabled on Gears 5. Just because for performance reasons, so these would have been off as well on PC. So now with these contact shadows, you get these amazing shadows again that we were missing before. So it really helps the believability. So contact shadows off, contact shadows on. I think I show one more corner here. Yeah, so contact shadows off and on. Just the amount of detail there is awesome. So again, this is all work in progress. You know, this is live and we're just tuning this as we speak. But just wanted to give you a quick glimpse of kind of Xbox Series X and what we're doing there. So I think that's it for me. I'll stop sharing.
On to me.
Super exciting.
Thanks,
yes.
Colin.
Cool.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining in. Like I mentioned, I'm a lead level designer. We're going to talk today about cover, the cover system in Gears, and the level management. So that's also for the open world, overworld stuff and the linear levels. But talking about cover first and foremost, Rainer mentioned that we pulled cover over from Gears 3, and what I find really interesting is if you can get your hands on a physical copy of Gears 1, I don't know if it's in the downloadable copy, you can open up the editor there and basically play with this more or less fundamentally as it is. We've copied the code over, we've made some UX changes, but if you wanted to lay out your own cover and try out and sort of do what we do, you can do that. What I've got here is sort of just a screenshot of what it looks like inside of our Rocket Hangar level. So the markup is a bunch of slots that are placed by hand for the most part by level designers. So there's some 1,200 objects on average in a level with multiple slots on each cover link. So there's a bit of a labor of love that the level design team goes through to put this stuff down that allows you to interact with it. And I'm going to play a video because I've got another level open to demonstrate some other stuff, but play a video just to show you the basics of cover inside of one of our cover gyms here. So cover has this parent-child relationship where you have a cover link that contains the slots. The slots are those red cubes there. As you move them around, there's certain selection methods, but really what the level designers do is they go through and they place out where each slot would be particular for the player to take an action on. in this case, end to end on this long rectangular piece of cover. You can go across from 0 to 3. As I add in these new pieces here, they're giving new actions to the player to do at those points. All of this is generated by raycasting forward, finding our collision, and then the system sort of decides, okay, can I pop up? Can I mantle over? If there's a cover slip or a SWAT option available, it'll generate that for you. We have the control to go in and do that ourselves, but I would say 90% of the time, we just rely on what the system does. If your collision is set up appropriately, it works out. And really what we're laying down is just a spline line that when the player gets into it, we drag the player along there. And as they reach these points, they're given opportunities. Now, that doesn't mean that the player can't mantle in between 2 points. So for instance, I'll pause. I just filled in those 2 points there. That doesn't mean that the player couldn't mantle in between there, but we're also placing for the AI. So the AI are going to actually use those points to generate some information as to line of sight or what actions they can specifically take. So as we go through, we only lay out one cover layout that allows you to move around and work with the AI. So this is a slightly more complicated example than a basic cube, but it gets the point across, and we would add some cover to the sides here and whatnot. And that's, like I said, you could kind of just get this from Gears 1 editor if you can get your hands on it and play around with it. It's a lot of fun to lay out cover. It does become tedious when we get those really large levels going. One thing I wanted to note here, that what we do when we build our levels, we're still on a Power of 2 grid when we port it over from Gears 3. So if you guys are familiar, earlier on, the Power of 2 grid, 2, 4, 8, and so on, we created a mesh set for ourselves that are these colored cubes here. That's just a 32 by 32 cube that we can come in and just multiply and scale a few times to get to our metric height that we want to, whether it's a 96 cover 3 times up, or we're going to walls for a single floor or double floor or whatever. The shapes are really basic. There's blocks and ramps and cylinders and stuff like that, but that really just allows us to keep a real quick metric gray box build out as we're working through our level. And you can't really talk about cover without talking about collision. So I have another screenshot here to share before I jump into the other editor. So this is an example of what you see in the world as you're going through these highly detailed environments that Colin just showed off. The level designers, in cooperation with the artists, we go through and we try to make the most simple version of that space that we can, so that the cover, you're always getting a snappy flat surface to get on top of or to get up against. The AI are going to be able to run around this without getting snagged on things. By comparison, that area has quite a bit of stuff going on in it. We go through and we make sure we turn things off and on. And actually, to hit some of our really aggressive frames, FPS specs, we were originally starting with no collision on any asset. So when you build a scene, we start from a no collision base just to hit those targets really early on. Collision on 1,000 assets here and there really starts to hit your perf. We opted in to say, hey, you know what, we're going to place our meshes. We're using this simplified hull anyways for our world. So it's not a matter of us turning things off. Sometimes it's really a matter of us going on turning things on. But the collision is very important to the cover, and that's a big part of what the level design team did near the end of the game. After we figured out our gray blocking, the art team will come in, they'll massage things around, and we need to get in there and make a difference afterwards. So let me jump to an editor, and I can show you that section there. So this is the defense level. This is an early level in the game, and you have to apologize for the hitches. I'm not on the local DDC as it tries to gather. You can see here that while it looks quite detailed, the layout of the level is very simple and it's very straightforward for the player collision. Everything's been boiled down to more or less 4 flat-sided faces. Or in some cases, we've created a spline blocking volume that we can curve out, gives us good faces along the way to snap to, and it's really quite handy. Oh, It's really quite handy to be able to do that. As you see, cover that I was showing in that L shape, it was 3-4 pieces or slots per cover. Inside of a larger level, you have to get an idea that this whole face is one clean piece of cover. So you're going through and not just placing for what would be the planter here. You're going through and placing through the planter. You're going up and over the rubble because the wall is all connected, and you're going through the light pink salmon color would be our low cover. The solid red cover is our high cover. So as you go, you have to place slots along the way to allow the player to transition appropriately through those. For everyone who's played a lot of multiplayer, the campaign team level design versus the multiplayer level design has a much stricter collision profile setting than what we do on campaign. In campaign, we're always pushing for more fidelity, more let me just turn these links off so I can show you. We're always pushing for more fidelity, and you don't maybe see the flat shapes as often. That's the hope. In multiplayer, they're very particular about their angles, very particular about the precision. You don't want to be in a tournament or in a high profile match and get stuck on something or get shot through something because you didn't know it was there or you couldn't get up on cover. For campaign, we're a little more loosey-goosey that way. We're trying to create this experience that's a little more of an imagination and a world you're getting into. So it's really interesting to kind of go through and pick through these pieces. I think I counted in this space alone, I think there was like 300 something individually placed cover links, and then inside those cover links, there's additional slots that are placed out. And we have some cool usability features that we do for that, where you don't have to go through and place each individual piece. If I scrub this video back, you can go in and say, let me get back here. There's a way to just fill in this section here. So if you have a really long walls and stuff like that, the level designer will place a few anchor points along the way. They'll hit a fill button. It'll fill appropriately to a point, and then you can come in and adjust that. And looking forward, as we get into these really detailed worlds, Unreal 5 just sort of blew our minds in terms of how we're going to do cover on some of these organics that we're going forward on. This is a place that we're going to really have to look into, making it a lot easier for the level design team to populate such a large world. I can only imagine if you could take cover on that temple example there. There's be all kinds of ridges to jump out on and everything. So very exciting things ahead, and some great opportunities for us to work on some tooling going into there. I have an example in here that's a little more particular to high-low, just to demonstrate for you guys. Here we've got sort of this high piece of cover, and it's really simply that these slots are our anchor points along the way. When you experience your player going up and down from cover, it's because they're transitioning from a slot along the way. So you'll notice if you experience a bug where you might be slowly transitioning up, or you haven't transitioned yet, or you transition too quickly, it might be that the cover editing was pushed in one direction or the other, or there wasn't a slot there for your character to react to. Equally, we have opportunities to go inside and adjust all of these slots. So if we don't want you to take high cover on a piece, we can set that to be set up to just be a low piece of cover. We can also set it to say, hey, prefer to lean out, prefer to pop out, don't SWAT, those sorts of things. But in general, we don't want to do that. We want to allow the AI to have the full breadth, and we want to be able to let the player have as much as possible. What I'm showing here is a quick example of sort of where we get to with our collision in a world. Not everything is always going to be right on metric. As we get more organic with the environments, as we get more destroyed with the environments, collision really becomes that important piece to the puzzle, where in this case, this pillar here is a little smaller than where you'd actually be, pillared up against. So we've set the cover to low, and we do this frequently through the game. You'll notice that we prefer, as the designers, that if you're against one of these pillars, you don't want to feel cheated that we're letting you get hit so hard. So in this case, we're going to say you're going to prefer the low cover. You can, of course, toggle your up and down if you want, but on first blush, you're going to come in and get that low cover, as well as the collision profile around this volume, which is larger than the pillar itself. Still going to allow those bullets to go through, but your physics capsule pill is going to be registering this larger piece here, and that's a big part of the editing that we go through and do there. And like I said, collision and cover for us is a really big piece of the puzzle that takes a lot of time at the end of the project. And we iterate through the mid stages of the project, but we really wait for the art team to get to the end there and work on it. I've got an example of a open world level that has a little more organic cover to it going on. This is one of the Derek POIs in the ice overworld. And it's just to give you an example of sort of, there is quite a bit of, let me change it here. There is quite a bit of collision still inside this space. Even though it's a very organic looking environment, we simplify it down. And that's really comes down to us working with the meshing team when they're making their assets. We can't just say, hey, make a tree with a stump that hangs out and we're going to hit that. If there's a fallen tree, that stump can hang out and have a piece of branch that's pointing up, but really we don't want that into the player's view. If there is that thing, then we need to put some collision around it. So we come into a point where we want to have the simplest environment that we can, even though on the outside it looks quite a bit more robust than what we've got. So yeah, just give you a little fly through here. The cover system's also been expanded for us to include blueprintable cover. So here's an example of one of the ice spheres in the sort of the ice world. Likewise, in the sand overworld stuff and in the sand themed levels, we have the spiracles, the sand glass. What we've been able to do in here is we've have the fall destination, and in the blueprint we can add in markers that say generate cover here when we hit generate, and it'll toggle them on and off for us as it falls down, as it falls up. It doesn't fall up, as it's in its upward position and as it falls down. So the level designers kind of just have to come through, place these things out. When we hit build, we'll generate these out. And then if anything's wrong, we can come in and adjust them later, but we don't need to go in and place them all by hand each time, hook them up to the blueprint or hook them up to any bit of scripting that we need to use to progress through there. What I clicked on here, which is pretty cool, if I can get it again, yep, is our AI line of sight cover grid. So it's the reason we have so many slots is the AI are really important for those slots. And each slot has a line of sight grid weighting generated from them. And this maybe isn't the best example, so I'll pull this picture up. So here's defense again. Each time you click a slot, it changes, and I can demonstrate that really easily for you. You could, but these are pretty subtle because they're all kind of in the same spot. But what you can really see here is green, black, and red are the colors. So red is something that you're vulnerable to. You can turn around and shoot, but you're going to be vulnerable to someone in that general voxel square. The green stuff is going to be something that's very easy for you in that position, and it does take into account whether you can pop up, whether you can lean out, and those sorts of things. So green is going to be, you're going to have the drop on them really great, and then black is pretty obvious to be that you can't see this whatsoever. You're undercover, and that's probably a pretty good spot to go. There's a really great example here I can show you of the defense area. Yeah, let me get out. Oh, why is that one not showing up? Okay, there we go. Didn't hit into it. So this car, you've got quite a bit of exposure here. And what's interesting, as I move along, you can see the black change because the car has the A-frame, B-frame going on. So it's a really good example. And then this one in the middle has been auto-adjusted for a particular AI hookup. So that one doesn't generate the right data. But it's really interesting. And so we'll use this to sort of get an idea. If we're having cover problems in a space with the AI. They're taking, they're turning their back on us. They're running to spots they shouldn't. 9 times out of 10, we can come in and sort of see, oh, maybe there's a piece of collision that's covering the line of sight for them. Maybe this mesh isn't generating that collision for them, so that we're not getting the right grid. And this is a really great way for us to visualize this. We can run this in game and in editor, and it's pretty cool. And that's kind of the gist of Cover. There's a lot more nuanced work that we do with different collision profiles to generate different types of cover. We do have some rules that we set up for preferring to lean out, preferring to pop up, whether or not we would generate a mantle there because of some expectation that we've set with our metrics that may be, roughly out of place in some areas. So we do take a little bit of hand holding through the level as we go, and it is a big part of the level designer's work. So it's definitely a labor of love, and they have spent many an hour working through that stuff. Let me just check my notes if there's any other cover stuff I could cover really quickly. Nope. Yeah, this topic could get quite deep, but that's kind of the basics of it. And I want to reiterate, if you can get a copy of the Gears 1 editor, you can just play with this stuff. You can make a low level, make a multiplayer level. We just ported this stuff forward. This is technically custom for us, but we're really working off the back of Epic code from Gears 1. And Jim Brown at Epic, he came and sort of helped us learn the ins and outs of the magic of working with cover and collision when we got shepherded onto the project. So that was really a great experience to learn from him and the team. Now I'm going to talk about the level setup. So again, with our level setup, we haven't done a lot of engine changes to the base streaming tools. We've done a lot of changes that under the hood, maybe we had to get there before Epic did for optimizations, for packet loading. We have our own material system, so that required us to make some changes. But in terms of the UX, we've made a few changes to wrap things, but we're using the same streaming systems that Unreal provides. And in fact, in Gears 4, we used more or less out of the packet, out of the box, streaming volumes and scripted streaming. And the volumes we would set up as you would expect volumes, but every once in a while we would script them by turning them off after you hit a back gate and whatnot. Into Gears 5, we really formalized that with something that we call a level section, which is just a collection of assets listed here that allow us to really define our area with a clearer, don't have to dig into the level to take a look kind of thing. The way we lay our levels out really dictates how we put our sections together. We work on a team of, on the campaign, there's, potentially at times 15 to 20 people working on a level, piling in there, trying to get work done. VFX artists, sound designers. We've got the meshing team, which owns a lot of files in there. The level designers obviously are sort of shepherding and controlling how this thing works, gets together, and continues to progress through. And then we're going to have outsourcers who all need to work in somewhere at one time. So we take, I'd say a fairly exhaustive approach to splitting our levels up. And this level is an interesting example. This one is 87 files. The majority of our levels are 120 to, we have one that I believe is like 160 sublevels on its own. And the reason we split that up is we define sections by number. So the start of the level, progressing past there, you got a big combat section, you move on. We define those by numbering them out as a section. We start with 000 so that we can have some room to work in. We might go to 10 or to 5 as an in-between, but we'll make these numeric increments to sort of define our sections instead of putting names down. If you put a name down for your sub levels, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself to that bit of gameplay. And if that doesn't work out, then there's a lot of renaming to be done. So what we do is we go through and we do that, and each of them has a script, mesh, moments are animations and anything that is characters interacting with each other in a very bespoke or choreographed way. Any bits of helicopter flybys and things that require focus on their own. And if someone wants to work on that, and it's not in the script file, it's not in the VFX file, it's in its own file, so they can work on it. VFX and sound effects, and then lighting is the final sort of general set that we always have for an area. This allows us to get a multitude of people working in the levels, working on the same sections at the same time, and we work in pods pretty closely to each other. So it's generally, most of the time, it's just turn around and say, hey man, can I unlock this level? Can I grab this? Can you check that in? I'll check that in. Copy paste, notepad hackery, that sort of stuff. But this allows us to get in there and get moving quickly. What you'll notice is, as I go down the side here, we've colored all of our levels into these packets, basically, where we really enjoy using the level coloration view. You could turn on streaming if you wanted to in the editor and fly through, but I've always found that the best way to do it is to turn on the level coloration view. Let me just deselect that piece of cover. There you go. And those corresponding colors become drawn with all the assets. So if we're looking at this burgundy red color here, we're looking at section 70. So we're looking at all these guys. So if I went ahead and hid these guys on the hitch, it's pretty clear and easy. So not only does that help us when we're coming in and hit the wrong one. Not only does that help us when we're coming in and we're trying to figure out memory problems or just how to set this level up, it's really great as well when someone new to level comes to work in it and they want to know what level they're working on, that maybe they don't know the keyboard shortcut to select an object and go to their current level. They can just turn this in and look at the level browser and just get a quick map idea of where they're at. And that's really quite powerful. It takes a bit of time to maintain and set up, but it's very worth it in the end. Let me just turn these off so I can show you some more stuff. A really cool thing about our sections is that we, we're still using all the same streaming protocols that Unreal has. We can go in here and prepare, loaded invisible, don't prepare. Don't prepare would be it's just listed in here. We're not using it. We would only really use that for a debug purpose. But inside of our P file, we can just set these up and then trigger them in script. In script, we get a callback when everything's loaded on, so we can, push forward on game progression logic to push through a level. We can go and start at this. This is a really handy piece of AI debug, or not AI, QA debug that we have, where you can just load up the editor, go to play, and we can jump to a particular section in the level that would kick off that bit of gameplay. More or less, it'll bring the level to the point where it's supposed to be for that piece of gameplay. There's, in this particular implementation, we did have to make sure that we weren't using those for certification build testing or something like that, because we're not getting the full walkthrough of the level. Maybe you spawn a material at the beginning or an effect at the beginning that is still live by the end of the level. You're not going to get that if you jump there. But this is really handy, and this is a really nice add-on to something that we kind of hand scripted in Gears 4 previously. But under the hood, other than this, we're still using other streaming methods inside Unreal, and in particular the overworlds. We're using the world composition editor. I don't know, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of just started 4.11 and there were some incremental changes, but more or less it's what was available at the time when we started this. And I believe the ice overworld is 9 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer tiles. Not all of them are playable space, but all of these tiles are sort of these major groupings of levels here. Same idea. We have colors going on. The colors are dictated by the World Comp browser. And if you haven't opened up the World Comp browsers before, it's pretty interesting. Like the kite demo from forever ago was what really brought this to life. And we've really only added in here some UX for these layers, and we've added in a actor that you can place in the world that allows us to put a little, a bit of text so you can figure out where you're at any given time. Aside from that, it's more or less the same, and it's all done by bounds distance-based editing. So as I'm clicking through here, you'll see these bounds for particular levels. So this is mesh B on X2, Y2, and as you skiff towards this with a streaming distance of 20,000. So if you're 20,000 units away from this bounds, you'll start to stream in all this stuff here. And this is where we spend most of our time at the end of the game, managing all that memory, making sure we could get the fidelity we want and the frame rate we want. And if you go and look in your, there we go. If you go and look, it's the same idea with the coloring, right? In this case, it's not about, I'm streaming in this particular piece because I'm hitting it, but it's sort of trickling in as we go through the world. And you can see, to a testament to the tech art team, all this red stuff is always loaded content. So some of our draw distances are very large in this level. And without this always loaded content, there would be a lot of popping or a lot of exposure of what's behind there as you load in. So they were able to get these assets looking high fidelity, looking really great without having to compromise on having them drawn all the time or through there. There are HLODs throughout here that will transition in and out as well, and that was a big part of the process for the overworlds here, bringing those into play. What do I have here? What else have I covered? I'd say the only other thing that we really changed from world composition, and it doesn't really come into play in this world here, but if I pull it over, what we allowed ourselves to do at one point was to get this details open. We allowed ourselves to offset a file, so we were figuring out how to work in conjunction with another team in Montreal, Behavior Interactive, and they started out helping us out, working on those POIs in the area. And we, you can't have them opening up the level all the time constantly. Early on, we were struggling with their network connection. They figured that out, but early on, we wanted to be able to say, hey, can we work isolated in an area? And then can we just pull that in? And they don't have to worry about rotating it and moving it. So we allowed ourselves to do these position offsets to sublevels inside there. And then the parent would bring all its children with it. So if I had here's a multiple one, just as an example, this is actually a tile. We wouldn't do it, but I would be able to bring, these two with me as I said, hey, offset this 6,000 units over here, 2,000 units down on the Z-axis, right? That was a really cool way early on for us to develop something in a gym type environment, and then we could just bring it into the sand or ice overworld, offset them, rotate them, get them into a place where we can then try to house that flow through the whole world. So we weren't having to load in the world all the time. And of course, you can selectively load. I didn't show it because it would have taken forever, but before I loaded this up for the presentation, I opened the world, it's empty, right? And then you either go through and load them all. We added a quick load all levels, but it allows you to go in and work. So oftentimes what you would also do is say, if you knew that you were working in a particular section, you would just go in, just load this portion of the level. And that made it really great because the level that Colin mentioned, Rocket Hangar, that thing is huge. That level is, I have an overhead screenshot of that level. That level takes down most of our PCs most of the time. This one large open area here was another testament to the tech level designers and the tech artists to get this to not have those LOD pops in frame budget, because we've got combat underneath, we've got combat across the middle at one point, we've got combat off the sides. There's all kinds of stuff going on in here, and this is the largest one room that we ever did to that fidelity. And you can see just based on the size of these other colored sections here, this level is pretty massive on its own in its own individual areas. And do I have the, yeah, I have the level browser for this one. So this one's 125 levels, and hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, it's a big thing, but as you go through and you just organize it appropriately, and it takes a little bit of time up front to do that, it pays dividends in the end. And it's just basic Unreal stuff. We're not doing anything fancy there. We're not, we're not designing a visualization tool or anything that you can't yourself use at home. Yeah, I think I've covered. Let me just check my notes. I think I've covered it all. Yeah. I think the bottom line is the UX was really a little bit of what we changed. The fundamentals were always there, and the UX changes were just adaptions that we needed to work with particular partners, or to maybe increase a little bit of speed here or there as we uncovered what we were making. So with that, I will stop sharing, and I believe it's Dave now.
Yeah,
Thanks
cool.
for that, Nick.
Thanks for that. There we go. So, like Colin, I made a video just to avoid loading assets and all that kind of stuff. And so the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the reject here. This is this creature that you see here, and just creating a prototype to prove out the rigging, because we really wanted to make quite a dynamic character, something that would look different, a lot of visual variety, because we're going to have a bunch of them around, and also to make them like dynamic in the sense that you could shoot their arms off and things like that. So one of the first things I did in this prototype is just like, let's add some noise to it. So here you can see I just turned on this jitter, and so that's the in the middle of the arms, it's kind of jittering up and down, and there I just turned it off so you can see what I'm talking about. And so this is all, it's not animation driven, at least in this prototype. It was, again, like I was making a prototype to hand over to the gameplay animation team to set up in their way. And so here in the event graph, you can see I'm just taking the delta time. I'm doing some other stuff with it, but the main thing I wanted to show here is just I've got these 3 sine waves that I'm just putting into a variable so that I can use those to create jitter inside of this character. And so by having 3 different sine waves, I can kind of make it so it's not just a constant ramping back and forth. It kind of pauses for a moment and all of that kind of stuff. And so aside from those kind of secondary jitter things, I also started layering in some jitter over top of the animation, in this case his head. And so you can see he's kind of jittering his head around here. And so in the anim graph, you can see it's just simply using this transform modify bone and taking those sine waves, running them through a clamp, a map range clamp, so we get like a minimum and a maximum value, and we pass that through into the rotation. And so the sine waves really kind of just bring that head to life, like he's kind of glitching out. And similar here, you can see, I didn't know what to call it. I called it a chest vent, but basically that circle that's in his chest there, it's kind of popping in and out with kind of the same way. And here you can see I've got this this checkbox where I'm basically able to swap that part to be a different part. And it's not really, I mean, swap isn't really the right term here, because we wanted to just have this self-contained asset to just kind of keep things as simple as possible. And so what we basically do, I'll just move over to the that part of the graph. So here you can see that's the section here. And so it's taking that Boolean, that checkbox, and just scaling either the root bone for that circle part that's going in and out, or for the root of those tentacles that are kind of dangling out, and they're being driven by dynamics, which I'll get into in a little bit, very, very briefly. And so we have lots of other breakable parts here. You can see I broke off a part of his face there, and then we can also break off his arms. And so this is where our gameplay would kind of feed into this. If you shoot his arm off, we could just break it off, and we could send that actually flying as a physics object into the world too. And so this kind of gave us a lot of flexibility on being able to create different looks on this character, but we wanted to go quite a bit further than this. And so the next bit here is just being able to kind of break his torso apart. And so here you can see we can kind of create this offset on his left side and then also on his right side. So he starts looking pretty mangled at this point. And we can also blend that head section of the torso basically to be, snapped to the left side or onto the right side, or anywhere in between, really. And so it was pretty interesting looks that we were able to get out of just doing these kind of offsets here. And so I'll show a little bit about how we accomplished that. So this is basically the graph for that. But actually, before I get too far into that, let me just show you what's going on with the skeleton, so you can kind of see, what's underneath the hood here. And so I'm just going to select the different spines that we have, and so you can see we have 4 spines in this creature. So there's the main one, and that's where the animation data is coming from. It's just this simple spine. But then we have a duplicate spine for his left side and the right side, and of course, the arms and all the other hierarchy is children of that. And then we have one for the head itself. And so in this way, by having those separate hierarchies, we could kind of control how they are blending with their offsets. And so that's going back to this animation graph here. You can see that, again, it's just using the modify bone, and we're just kind of overriding the rotation on it based on some math and some curves. So you can see if I just select one of these nodes here, it's got a curve in here, which kind of adds like a bit of control over how it's going through as it's moving from the variable of going from 0 to whatever maximum range I have clamped in there. So it's just not a linear way. So that was just the curve. The reason for that curve is just to avoid some of the clipping that would just be present if you just did a linear offset there. And then there's a copy bone in there that just kind of keeps some of the bones tied to the root of the center of his spine. And then for the middle torso blender here, you can see that's the thing that sends his head section back and forth. It's really just doing an alpha blend between a copy bone of the left side hierarchy or the right side. And so that way it'd easily be able to blend in between those two. So this was really giving us kind of quite a few different looks on this character, which is cool. And then just briefly, this is just some of the dynamic stuff that we had in here. I'll just pause for a moment. So I'm not going to go too far into this because this was a very custom system that we set up for Gears 5 called Rod Dynamics here, and that's what this node is. I did make a talk on that goes deep dive into it. So if you do a search in YouTube, for like Gears 5 character dynamics, you'll see that, and so you can kind of check that out if you want to learn more about what we did for that. Yeah, and so the next bit that I'm going to show is, and so here you can see there's a bunch more of the dynamics of those tentacles. But the next bit is this IK. So we've got like all the time we're running IK on feet and hands for contact points and that kind of thing. But of course, when you're stretching his torso apart like that, you're kind of breaking that. And so if I just remove this, it makes it kind of obvious as to what it's doing. So I just recompile that here. And then when we do the torso offset, you can see how his wrist is kind of staying in place. And that's because it's like IK is telling it, hey, this is where you're supposed to be. And so that's why I just added these little things in here to just actually offset the IK targets themselves so that it would look, more natural. Yeah, so it was a really good exercise to kind of go through, prototyping all these features that we wanted to have in gameplay, and then kind of create the skeletal mesh and hand it over to our gameplay engineers and animators to be able to kind of create this guy. And here's just a little bit more of showing off how we can break, his legs off as well. Same strategy of what I was showing you before of breaking it through scale in the animation graph. And it's really gross when we break the entire pelvis. You can see his kind of guts hanging out, which is pretty gross and cool at the same time. So yeah, the reject was a very interesting creature for us to kind of play around with and iterate on. Cool. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is face animation and its transferring between different characters. So first I'll just start with, here's JD. It's just playing like a pretty standard range of motion animation. And over here you can see all of the different blend shapes that we have on his face. And there's quite a few in there, and you can see their values going up and down. And so that's cool. There's actually, it's not just blend shapes. We also have other features in here. So you can see if I turn off the detail lighting that, those wrinkles that were there, they're not in the geometry. Obviously, it'd be too much geometry. And so if we turn on the detail lighting, you can see how those wrinkles are blending in based on what blend shapes are being driven. So like a brow kind of scrunch like this is doing one normal map blend, whereas a brow raise is doing a different one. And so if I open up the material here, we've got a debug that will show the regions that we have for blending those wrinkles. And this was something that I believe Jeff Lester kind of put together for us, which is really great. So here you can see just the different regions triggering on and off, and they have different colors to show you that region with their alpha blend into other regions. So here you can see there's green and there's red, and then the yellow that's in between, which is a blend between those two regions. And so that was really good for us to kind of just, see how those regions are working with each other and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how the wrinkle stuff was working. And so we did have other pieces of geometry in here other than just the head itself. So we've got some eyelashes. It's a little hard to see there, but and some eye water. And so you can see this little highlight underneath at the bottom eyelid there. It's just there to give a little bit of highlight of specular highlights of the water being on there. And of course they have their own blend shapes to follow along as well. And then another one here is our eyebrow hairs. So you can see we've got a bunch of custom eyebrow geometry per character customized, obviously, especially with JD and his scar there. And so the next thing I'm going to show here is, okay, let's transfer that same animation to a different character. And so here I've got, I'm going to switch to Marcus, but you'll notice I didn't change the animation. And so it's all set up to just kind of work. So here you can see that same animation is working across different characters. And so since this is a cinematic version of Marcus, he has the same blend shapes and all that, and so that's a pretty easy transfer to do. What it gets more interesting is to switch to like one of our enemy characters, one of the drones, and so he doesn't have any blend shapes. He only has bones that are driving his facial expressions. But we can still use that exact same animation, and you can see it's driving the bones there, and it'll interpret the animation data. Now, of course, this drone doesn't have lips, so we're going to lose some things there, but the jaw opens and the brow ups and the cheek scrunches and all of those kinds of things are going to transfer through that animation system. And so it was a really nice, powerful feature that we built into the engine to be able to do this transfer. So now in Unreal, there's a thing called pose assets, but of course we didn't have that when we were developing. So this is the system that we built, and we're looking forward to upgrading essentially to pose assets. But just wanted to briefly show how this system works. So here we have a bone that's in our rig that's we called it Face Express. So FX channel 01 is a bone, and we're taking the translate X of that bone. And so as that bone would translate between 0 and 1, that would be its curve. And we could pipe that curve into, in this case, a morph target called left inner brow up. Now, if we go over to that drone and look at that same data, you can see that there's that same bone in his rig, and we're using that same channel, but we're piping that into what we call a joint action. And so that joint action is really a collection of bones and their transforms, and we name it the same, left inner brow up. And so that way the animation data will just transfer between character rigs independent of what is actually in that character, like blend shapes or bones or whatever deformation methods we were going to choose. Oops. And so the next thing I wanted to show here, sorry, I'm just waiting for my video to catch up to my talking. Oh, I just wanted to show some other actions here. Oh, one of the other things I wanted to talk about here is that you can see that, you know, for the JD character here, he has some channels that are actually Bone's joint actions as well. So our cinematic characters were kind of a mix of blend shapes and Bone transforms as well to kind of optimize our character as much as possible to keep our memory down, our performance running well. And so, so that's how that worked. So the next thing that I wanted to show here is just the data of what those joint actions look like. And so here you can see if we expand this, what we call an action unit, there's the brow up contains, you know, multiple joint actions. And in each of those joint actions, it contains multiple bone transforms. So you can see there's a left inner brow, which I'm hovering over, and then left nose bone. And so they each have their own little subtle transforms. Now, of course, we're not entering the data into this form to kind of get this stuff. We had a bunch of tooling that was in Maya to be able to create these poses and then export those into the game. But I won't go into that too much, but that's basically how that worked. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to show is a cinematic. So I decided, like, just for fun, I'm going to take a cinematic and replace all of the main characters in it with drones, except for Kate. And so it's just something that's kind of fun. I didn't spend a lot of time on it. There's a few visual bugs in the cinematic, but like I said, it's just for fun. So Victor, if you could play that would be great.
Right out.
Kate. Kate. No. Kate, you can't see this. You don't want to see this. I'm sorry. Kate? I'm sorry. Thanks, JD, for coming here.
Of course.
Can I recommend we maybe get these people out of here? Hey, just slow down.
No, Foz is right. We need to move.
What are you talking? Oscar's dead, man. Give her a minute.
She'll get her minute in the Raven.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Now we need to leave.
I'm not going.
Excuse me?
For months now, I've been having these dreams. Nightmares. But I think they were messages.
What?
Something's happening to me.
It's your grandmother's.
Enough. We'll deal with this later. Foz, round these people up.
I need help.
There's a place up north. I think we can find you answers there.
No.
Absolutely not.
We have orders.
You'll go with me.
God damn it, both of you, listen.
I'll go with her. Look, if you're missing, Jen will notice. Okay. I'll push Jack the coordinates.
No, Corporal, you are coming back to New Ephyra. That is a direct order.
Well, Captain, screw your order. This isn't about you. It's about me. I need to fix this.
Hey, watch her. Her necklace? That's a locust symbol.
Yeah, so?
She would never be our enemy by choice. I know that.
Because she would die for us.
I know that. But what if it's not her choice?
That's a great demonstration of the tech there. I think you gave everyone in chat a bit of a laugh.
It's awesome.
All right. David, was that the end of your presentation, I believe?
Yeah, that's it. That's it for me.
Great. Well, unless there's anything else y'all wanted to cover right off the bat, I was thinking we could go to some of the questions that we received throughout the stream. Sounds good. All right then.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Colin, one of the users was curious, what's the difference between cone step mapping and tessellation?
Yeah, that's a great question. We found we had to make a decision at some point in Gears 5 in terms of what uses tessellation and what uses relaxed cone step mapping. We had to make a rule in the rule of thumb. The difference basically is cone step mapping is a texture-based solution to do offset, and tessellation is using triangles to actually extrude the mesh out and do the offset. The downside of relaxed cone step mapping is you can't do like a lot of layers on top of a layer. It gets quite expensive, because you have to pay for every relaxed cone step map. So if you have like dirt on top of brick, that's 2 cone step maps. Whereas tessellation, that's just 1 tessellation pass to tessellate the dirt and the brick. So we basically found if we want to do a lot of offset layering and displacement, we'd use like real-time deformation. We use tessellation. And if we wanted to just have high frequency something like bricks actually is a really good example of high frequency deformation that should be in a relaxed cone step map most likely. Good question.
Let's see. One of the users were curious. It's been discussed before that map development can take 4 to 6 months. Can you quickly go over the general process so the end user can get more context?
Sure. Yeah, we have quite an extensive process where we start out with just the concept, obviously, and that can be from a prototype. That can be from a series of prototypes that we previously had been ideating on, and we'll stay in that phase for a little bit, and what we'll do there is also get some concept art or key art together. From there, a level designer moves into sort of the block out phase, where it's them mostly, but they'll work with the mesher if there's someone available to get space and proportion together. That portion right there can take a bit of time to get an idea, the distances from a key objective to the next key objective, the combat zones that we might have in between there, any narrative cinematic spaces that we need. So it can sometimes be 2 weeks on that phase to a month if it's a particularly large level. But as we go through there, we're signing off on ideas, or we're signing off on intentions in that space. And then we move into sort of our scripting 1 and visuals 1, or just before that, refining the concept as GeoShell and script shell. And these are points where it's still really rough. It's still really malleable. We haven't split out the level to that huge list of levels, sub-levels that I showed earlier yet. And we'll do a little bit of internal testing on it, so that can keep that level in that phase for a little while after that. Once that's done, we move to script 1, viz 1, script 2, viz 2, script 3, viz 3, and then there's the polish phases. And those are where we start to spend the most time. In the first, 1 phase, we don't spend a lot of time with scripting around all the conditions yet, just to get the feeling. We describe it as a developer or the designer who knows it can drive the level. So that's really our bar there. Into visuals 2, after visuals 1, that's where the art team really takes a big amount of time to sort of break the level down and reconstruct it with all the sets, the modular pieces, the key areas, put those together. And then the scripting 2 is also where the level designer spends a good chunk of time really refining that. And we call that the drivable portion, right? So that's something where we could put that in Colin's hands. Let's say Colin hasn't touched the level, he hasn't been in any of the meetings, but we could say, hey, Colin, if you sit down, you can get through this more or less without us having to guide you through. There's not a blue texture on the wall that just signifies something that he doesn't know about, or there's going to be jump point requirements and that sort of stuff. So number 2 is kind of where the bulk of the work is spent to turn that level from gray or orange or whatever they're using to box it out to something that looks like a level. And then Viz 3 and Scripting 3 is hammering out, polishing those, those choreography moments. The combat spaces are getting refined. The level artists are starting to move into a more detailed area. And through there, we'll still make changes. So, it's not... as much as it may be begrudgingly to some developers, we still go through and we'll say, hey, that combat encounter, we need to reconfigure this space. So that can keep that going for a little longer. But after that, we move into a polish phase. And polish phase is really where we get together as a team one last time, look at the level and say, hey, what's going on here? Are these all fitting? Do we need to make any changes? And where are we pushing the polish to? But there's that middle chunk is really where we spend the bulk time pulling it up. For the multiplayer team, I think there's a lot more testing going on through those phases, a lot more competitiveness, potentially some external UR as well throughout there. So, if they're asking about a multiplayer level versus a single player level, I can't speak too long to how they do it, but I imagine it's probably roughly the same, different steps along their testing process. And for us, a level could take longer than 6 months if we're waiting for content or we're not really sure yet where it's at, especially if it's later in the game and we want to see if we can connect some dots a little bit better.
They were curious how hard it is to how hard is it to port custom in-house systems to a new version of Unreal? And I think Colin might be able to clarify, or Rainer, a little bit of how you actually deal with your custom version of the engine and the commits that happens to the master branch.
Rainer can do that one.
So for custom changes, we have a process where we try and actually avoid making changes to the core engine, just because it can make integrations more challenging as we grab newer versions of the engine or backport systems. But we do have, but sometimes we do need to go into the engine and make some pretty extensive changes, especially earlier on. With current versions of the engine, we've actually embraced more of a kind of an engine plugin model, and we're also looking at plugins for gameplay as well now, which obviously make it more portable and easier to make changes without making it harder to integrate and take newer versions of the engine. We do have a process for when we do make engine changes where we have explicit code markup, where we can track the changes that we've made so that when we're integrating newer versions of the engine, we can clearly see what is our code, what is Epic's code, and we can kind of resolve those differences. In terms of how challenging it is to make some of these changes, I think the plugin systems and the kind of editor level changes are they're fairly straightforward. As you get deeper and deeper into the engine, I mean, there's a lot of caveats, and I would actually caution game developers to make engine changes or against making engine changes unless you're willing to take on the burden of maintaining that and trying to keep it compatible with what Epic is doing. However, for the changes that we did make, which obviously made a huge difference in us being able to kind of introduce new tech early on, push console hardware, really innovate on top of the work that Epic was doing. Our developers really need to understand the engine at the same level Epic does. Otherwise, we can get into trouble. And so for the more lower level changes, definitely you need to understand the code you're working with really well. In terms of things like the cover system and sort of custom workflows, we found the engine actually really amenable for making these kinds of changes. I know with the move from Unreal 3 to Unreal Engine 4, I know Epic's goal was to make the engine more genre agnostic, and we were able to make quite extensive changes to the engine without, disrupting a lot of core low-level tech.
Do you generally pull an entire version, or do you mainly cherry pick from the changes?
So our goal is always to pull the entire engine, like an entire version. When we started with Gears, we actually started with Unreal before 4.0. We actually started with sort of, the version, code word was Lemmings at the time, because, the analogy is you're jumping off a cliff. And we did full engine integrates from, 4.0, 1, all the way up to 4.11. Every month we would do a full engine integrate. And then as we got sort of farther on, we then we made the decision to kind of lock the engine version because we were in full production. But we still wanted to be able to take advantage of new features. Like every time a new version of Unreal would come out, I'd get an email from Colin with like, here's the list of things that we need to get. And so we would do that. And, we ultimately decided to grab major subsystems and major features and sort of backport them. So, with Gears 5, we essentially have a pretty complex hybrid blend of different versions of Unreal along with our own custom versions. And, as we kind of look forward, our goal is to rebase the engine with Unreal, the latest version of Unreal, obviously looking towards Unreal Engine 5, and embrace more of a plugin based model so that we can continue to integrate. I think one thing that's really worth taking advantage of is Epic has a massive engineering team, and the amount of productivity and output from them is phenomenal. So you want to continue to take advantage of that and be able to take integrations and drops really far into your development cycle.
And then there was another question: was how long does it take for your studio to upgrade to a new version of Unreal?
Well, it's going to be very dependent on a developer, their team, and what sort of changes they've made to the engine. I think early on it took us, maybe a couple days. As we went, further on into Gears development, because of the sheer amount of complexity of kind of low-level changes that we had made, it would take sort of calendar time, anywhere from six weeks to 3 months, but it would require several developers to actually take on that work. As we look at kind of the what good looks like is really sticking to that sort of 4 or 5 day model, and being able to integrate new changes without having to maintain a lot of legacy. A lot of the actual features that we built, whether it be supporting the Xbox One console, DirectX 12 support, some of the animation changes, lots of bug fixing, we've been able to push that back and work with Epic to get that back into the latest version of Unreal. And so, we know a lot of the things, and they were mentioned. Okay, sorry about that. They were mentioned, during the different talks here, that there are new features in the engine that are essentially upgrades to kind of custom changes that we've made that Epic's provided something equivalent. So we're now able to go onto the newer versions of Unreal and kind of leverage that tech and leave some of the custom legacy we have behind.
Now, there's a question here in regards to characters, and I think this could probably warrant an entire stream in itself. But the question is, how do you create such good-looking characters? What's your workflow on character creation?
Oh, wow. That's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, it is.
There's a lot of people that are involved in that process. Obviously, we start with concept art, and then it goes to the modeling team, and, they're going to be creating all the materials and textures, and then it's going to go to the rigging team, and we're going to be creating the rigging and the dynamics for that character. And, tech art gets really involved too with, creating a lot of those materials and stuff. I don't know if Colin, you want to jump in and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we definitely like the thing I guess worth calling out is Gears 5. We did take a big step back in early pre-pro and look at our character faces and kind of how can we improve on these faces, and that's where a lot of the decisions came that Dave showed off, which was like modeling in the eyebrows and modeling the meniscus underneath the eyes, and we revisited all the shaders and have like the eye shader that I talk about in the Unreal Dev Days talk with real-time caustics and the hair shaders, and we just kind of revisited every single aspect and just kept getting it to a point. Then we'd send it out, like the art directors would get involved and start looking at it and do paint overs, and we'd go back and remodel. And so we kind of did that with Kate for I think a long time, like 6 months or so, just to really get her nailed. And then we basically went from that and did Marcus and everybody else and upgraded them to the kind of the Gears 5 treatment. But it's an involved process for sure. So it's all attention to detail. It's 1,000 little things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially with face animation performance, like for Kate, like you were saying, we spent so much time just making the blend shapes look really good, and going back and forth with the animators and doing animation tests, and and then doing facial capture and testing that, and there's that could be an entire stream, like you said. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that anything more specifically, really.
Also, very talented artists. Very talented artists.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that shows when you watch the end result, and also hence probably why the question was asked, because of it.
Cool.
Maybe we'll have you back someday to talk about that. So someone was a little bit curious about the cutscenes, and I think it wanted us to clarify that they are all done in real time using Sequencer, right?
Well, we didn't actually use Sequencer in Gears 5. We were using Matinee. At the beginning of Gears 5 pre-production, Sequencer was kind of young at that time. We'll use that word. And so we basically decided, we have a pipeline from Gears 4 that's working pretty well for our cinematics. The main difference from Gears 4 to 5 for our cinematics is that we're going all real time in all of our cinematics, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we didn't, but of course we will be looking into that for future projects.
Someone's curious about the anti-aliasing. Can you throw some light on the anti-aliasing for Gears?
Yeah, sure. Well, we just used the base Unreal Engine temporal upscaling. And so we did upgrade and do a full integrate. I believe it was 4.19 where Unreal Engine introduced the temporal upscaling. So we brought that over into 4.11, which was a Herculean engineering effort. Yeah, we used the standard. We didn't do any changes as far as I can recall. We just used the base TAA with temporal upscale, dial in the sharpen, get a few things just done right. I don't know, Rainer, anything else you want to add to that?
I think it was a big visual improvement from Gears 4 to Gears 5. Gears 4 we had temporal anti-aliasing, but we didn't have the solution from 4.19, and through that we were able to increase the visual quality of the image dramatically. Yeah, we pretty much used it out of the box. I think we may have, we played a little bit around with the settings to kind of dial it in, but we were super happy with the result.
Someone's curious about how does the current tile system work with Unreal? Is it something the Coalition has built specifically for Gears 5?
The world composition tile system?
I'm not actually sure precisely which tile they were referring to. I believe the question was asked during the presentation or the video of Gears Tactics, so it might have been what you touched on right before that.
Right. So the tile system in Gears Tactics is custom. It does. We do use kind of a system where we figure out which tiles can be compatible with other tiles. There's a little bit of sort of offline processing to kind of figure out what sort of tile sets work with each other. The runtime lighting system for figuring out sort of cross tile lighting and cross cover lighting, that is a custom system that we built.
I believe there's a Gamma Sutra article as well that you guys can look up that talks a bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I'll try to grab that link and drop that in the forum announcement post. And it's worth to mention that for some of the links that the team here has mentioned, I will try to make sure to put them in the forum announcement post in case you have trouble finding them later. How do you manage and mitigate your mesh draw calls within your landscape-based maps, especially given the difference of impact between console and PC?
Yeah, great question. We primarily focused on console, just that tended to be like the lowest common denominator in a lot of cases. PC can handle quite a few draw calls. So we'd focus down on console, 60 frames per second on Xbox One X, and that was sort of, again, the limiting factor, and sort of see what we could do there. So we would, of course, use HLODs as much as we could. Sometimes we would generate an HLOD and then make that the base mesh as well. That we did that in the Ice Overworld. Tony Wang, our tech artist, did some amazing work there where he would just generate, he would grab a whole bunch of ice cliffs and then generate a new base mesh and then he would delete the old ice cliffs and put that base mesh in. He'd use the HLOD system for that. That allowed us to prevent a lot of popping. We had a lot of issues with popping early on with the ice shaders because the HLODs didn't use an ice shader, but the base meshes did, and it created a lot of popping for us. So we just eventually said, forget this, let's just make the HLODs the base mesh. And so the other big vector there was the instance meshes, and we did a lot of back and forth on kind of playing with the clustering sizes of the instance meshes. Do we convert the instance meshes to static meshes, because then you have better view frustum culling but maybe more draw calls? So it was sort of like a GPU versus draw thread balancing act, where we're trying to decide how many draw calls we could sustain versus the view frustum culling could call. How granular could we make the pieces? So yeah, it was one of the toughest challenges on Gears 5, was getting those draw calls in check on the overworlds, as we called them. Yeah.
I know we don't have an audio designer or implementer here on the team, but we did have an audio question, which was how was the spatial audio baked into the level?
I can help a little bit. Or Rainer could also.
Yep,
I did work with Nikunj at the Microsoft R&D team a little bit on implementing Triton early on in Gears 4, and we started out as just a volume-based procedure that would then be collecting in an offline or an overnight process that would create the voxels. And I believe over time, what we did is sort of just picked and choose how it sees the world, what collision channels to use, what assets to include or disclude. And the final solution, Mike can get to this, but the final solution, I believe, is a little bit more of a read the world and pick through it rather than having to go through and define the stuff.
Yeah, we pioneered some new technology with Microsoft Research for Gears 4 that we then brought to Gears 5, called Triton. It's actually called Project Acoustics now, and it's actually available for any developer. So if you search up, I believe it's Microsoft GameStack and Project Acoustics, you can try it out, and there's an Unreal 4 plugin for it. What it basically does is we would create a bounding volume within our level. And then offline, through quite a lot of offline compute, it would figure out a volumetric kind of grid that would track the occlusion and the reverberation of sound within a scene. There's a lot of analogy to light baking and radiosity, but in this case, you're tracking the way audio bounces around an environment. And then at runtime, we then use this, and we can have any audio source and a listener. And then it could figure out the parameters for audio occlusion and reverberation, which we would then feed into kind of a traditional DSP model for the audio acoustics.
Interesting. Cool to hear that it was a custom system. There was a question in regards to the snow mechanics or deform. When the snow is deformed, does the engine allow for details as the trails being filled again with falling snow?
So as the trails fill in again, is there additional detail there? Is that what the question is? We basically tried to make it so you almost never saw the trails fill in again. The trails were so persistent that they would be depressed down for a long time. I think you would maybe see it if you played in split screen locally on a PC. On an Xbox, you could get it to see the trails disappear. But we did have details underneath the snow sometimes, if that's sort of the question. Like we'd have little grass and things like that could get revealed through the snow being pushed down. But that was usually around objects, not just randomly. That's about all I know on that.
There was a question for David here. Have you ever thought about creating a completely alternate Gears universe where the Swarm are the main characters?
Oh, okay, well.
Totally.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I mean, like you said, or like I showed, like we can kind of transfer animation and stuff. So maybe we're already set up to do it, but wouldn't hold my breath.
Let's see. I think I have time for one more. We are already a little bit way past the time set out for the stream, and I know you're all probably busy, or want to get busy getting back to your jobs. Let's see, last one. I guess it's fairly interesting. Feel free to answer if you'd like to. How has the team transitioned into work from home, and how has that affected development?
Yeah, I think we could probably all answer that and add a bit of flavor to it. It's actually been pretty successful. I mean, obviously it was jarring at first because you're not in the office and able to sort of interactively collaborate in the same way. But of course, we use video conferencing to kind of communicate with everyone. What we found is a lot of our workflows will work just fine remotely, and so we'll have our computers in the office, and we'll remote in, and we'll be able to work in the editor. We'll be able to kind of work with the Xbox. In some cases, we've taken the hardware home, and we've worked from home. It's some of the challenges we've had is just getting builds moved around. So we have a pretty large game, and so when we have daily builds, we want to have a play test, or we want to have kind of review the latest, dailies, if you will. Being able to distribute those around quickly when you're not inside like a high bandwidth internal network has been a bit challenging. We ended up building a kind of a custom system with Azure where we could host our builds up there, and then you could kind of download them pretty quickly, which really helped out. I'd say one other thing is, because we've been working with distributed development with Unreal for quite a long time with a lot of different partners, we've already had to face and solve a lot of problems with trying to work in a distributed manner where not everyone's in the same studio. Part of that's kind of a testament to Unreal, but also, we've had to deal with things like how do you deal with a distributed DDC? How do you deal with not having IncrediBuild or a large set of machines? How do you deal with kind of just getting access to kind of files and communicating, whether it be with on a corporate network or on a proprietary network? So overall, I'd say we miss each other. We miss being in the office, but we've been able to maintain and be really productive working remotely.
This is my living room behind me, obviously. You can see it's a massive living room. I put a big Swarm poster on the wall. It's very nice. Just kidding. I'm in the office for this.
Making sure you get that fiber connection, right?
Yeah.
So, that's probably the biggest. That's to add to what Rainer was saying. That's probably, for me, was the biggest hurdle, was just that connection consistency and speed early on. A lot of that has been ironed out. And motivation, I think, it's been kind of hard to stay undistracted and into what you're doing when there's so much going on, and you're at home and you could clean the kitchen instead. So
yeah, I found that the team has transitioned pretty well, like kind of surprisingly so. At first, when everybody was going home, we had my team kind of supports the new character skins and for the operations, and so we're like, oh my gosh, we've got these commitments that we've made, like we're going to deliver this X number of characters in this time, and we've managed to hit all of our targets. So that's really a testament to just the team working together, even though that we're apart. We use Teams and communicate with each other all the time. I think one of the main things is just like reviewing things is more difficult now. It's like one of my artists is working on a new character. Now I have to like sync up and test it and try it myself instead of just going to his desk and or his or her desk and checking it out. So that's kind of been the main difference for my team.
If you are curious about improvements that can be done to your Unreal Engine workflow, we do have a couple of threads on the forums where you can read about how to use sort of Unreal through remote desktop and other various solutions. I wasn't able to grab those links just yet, but I will grab them and make sure I add them to the forum announcement post as well, so that you can find them. With that said, I think we might actually be hitting the longest Inside Unreal live stream that I have ever done since I started here. And so I thank all of you for taking this time out of your day. The presentations were very, very, very impressive and in-depth. It's great to see all the work that you all and the rest of the team back at the Coalition has done for Gears. And I'm excited to play Gears Tactics. I think that's actually going to be... I love that kind of combination, getting the Gears universe and that top-down tactical sort of mode, I would say.
It fits very perfectly, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Especially when it comes.
Thanks for having us, Victor. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for everybody watching on the stream as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
for
sure.
I hope to get all of you back on the stream at some point, maybe to cover, all the stuff that you're currently working on and see all the interesting customizations and improvements and workflows that you are doing. We're not going to leave just yet. I did want to take the opportunity to mention that if you are curious about what it's like to work with Unreal, go ahead and head over to unrealengine.com. You can download the engine for free. It is available. All it requires is a relatively low to mid-tier gaming PC. So if you have one of those and you're curious about what it might be like being a game developer and potentially even be able to work at the Coalition one day, that's the place to go. Now, we know that this was a long stream and there might be a lot of specific information that you're curious about. Something that we do with all of our streams is that we actually transcribe the entire stream. So we have a very, very, very great a person working behind the scenes of actually taking everything that's being said and writing it up and making sure that all the technical terms are the correct spelling. That transcript, after a couple of days, once the video goes up on YouTube, you can actually download that transcript, Control F, and search for specific key terms that were said throughout the stream. And this is a good way, especially if you're just, having it on a separate screen or listening with one ear, doing work with the other, if you want to go back and find the timestamp where that was said, because each line that is spoken, and as I'm saying this, there will be a transcript that says just this, has a timestamp next to it, and then you can go to the video and find that. It is really useful in case you were only curious about the snow or, the level design of whatever was discussed during the stream, and that is for all of our Inside Unreal live streams. Making sure I go through my notes here. Our community groups are actually still throwing meetups, and so head over to communities.unrealengine.com if you are curious about visiting. Now, throughout the pandemic, they have been throwing virtual meetups using Discord, Zoom, other various forms of communication. And go ahead, if you are curious about a local meetup group, you can find one there. And I will say this time, you might even be able to find a group that might physically be quite far away, but sort of have the opportunity for you to talk and discuss Unreal Engine and the work that you are doing. We are looking very much for new countdown videos. So if you've been watching this from the beginning, thank you very much. Hope you've been having a great time. At the beginning of the stream, we have a 5-minute countdown video. We are looking for more of those. This is 30 minutes of development of your project. Fast forward that into 5 minutes and send that to us together with a logo of your game or your studio. And we might go ahead and put that on as one of the countdowns for the stream. Our community spotlights, we find them all over the webs, but do make sure to post them in the released or work in progress section of our forums, as well as Discord. Unreal Slackers is a great place if you're looking for a good portion of the community. Just go to unrealslackers.org and you will find many thousands. I'm not sure, I think if PFIS is in chat, he can chime in with what the actual number is, but it's growing by, I think, hundreds every day, which is really exciting. Next week, we are going to cover the UGC example project that Chance Savvy has put together. So if you watched the news community spotlight segment from the beginning, we have now an opportunity to provide mod support for your games. And next week I'll have Chance Savvy on the stream covering that. With that said, big special thanks to the Coalition for coming on, making sure that this was as exciting and interesting. I definitely think I'm going to go ahead and go back and watch the stream again to make sure that I can actually get all of the knowledge that were down there, and it's really exciting to see. Nick, I think you mentioned, because you were mentioning a sort of a download of Gears 1.
Right, yeah. No, I think it's only the physical PC copy that has the editor. Mike corrected me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I used to learn for a while there, right? In between Unreal Tournament in the early days, and yeah, if you want to make especially if you want to make want to learn level design and make single player content, there's a great little platform there. It is older, you're gonna be back in that world of additive, subtractive brushing and all that stuff, but worthwhile checking it out. This content.
Cool. With that said, I think it's time to end the stream today at the 2 hour and 28 minute mark. Thanks once again, and for all of you out there, I hope you're staying safe and that you have a great weekend. And we will see you next week again. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.